Today we will write a program for printing this pattern. So this is a pyramid of numbers. So today we will build our logic for printing this pyramid. Before we go to the code section, let's analyze the pattern first. So if you focus, you can see it's similar to our previous pattern, somewhat identical. It has n number of rows, and each row is printing a fixed amount of numbers. Actually, shall I say, an increasing amount of numbers. So each row will print an increasing amount of numbers. And as you can see, here we can see a pattern. So just like last time, we will in the printing patterns we always loop at least two loops. So our outer loop is used to control the number of rows. Since there are five rows, therefore our loop, I will call it I loop since it's the outer loop, will go from 1 to 5 since there are 5 rows. And for columns, we use another loop inside that loop. So for each value of I, the inside loop will complete its full iterations. But let's see how our inside loop will work. As you can see, we are getting a fixed pattern here. Uh, for each uh, for each row, the number of elements depends upon the value of I. So for the first iteration, the value of I will be 1. So therefore, only one element is getting printed. And as you can see, for the second iteration, two elements are getting printed. So for each iteration of I number of elements are printed in the nested loop or the loop which is inside the outer loop. So and one more thing we can analyze here that our printing variable is constant for each iteration of I. So as you can see, first iteration we are printing 1, and for second we are printing 2, and for the third one we are printing 3, 4, 5. So as you can see, we are printing it for different numbers. So we are printing it for the same number. So our printing variable will be I, since it's already evident that for each of these numbers represent the iteration of I, and they are telling us how many times this iteration is executed. So let's see how it works. So first, we have a total variable in which we will store the total number of rows. You can take that input from the user also if you want. And then we have a for loop which will control the number of rows. It will go from 1 to 5 in this case, up to 1 to total. So here it will run from 1 to 5. So it will execute for a total number of 5 times. And the inside loop that will go from 1 to I. So as you can see, the amount of numbers depend upon the value of I here. First we are printing one number, then we are printing two numbers. So as you can see, it depends upon the value of I. And for each iteration of j, uh, we are printing a number. So for now, let's remove this piece of code. I want to focus on the simple printing parts. And now we are printing I, the value of I in each iteration of this inside loop. So let's run our program. So as you can see, we are getting the expected output 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's not a pyramid. So to make a pyramid, we need to analyze more stuff about it. So let me undo that and let's see what we can see. So let's look here. So as you can see, each element has a fixed number of spaces before it. So if you notice that elements preceding the first element are printed by just an empty space. So as you can see, after 1 there's an empty space which you can't see. Then we go to the next line, and after 2 there's an empty space, and after 2 there's an empty space as well. Same for 3. So our this part is done. We already have spaces after our numbers, right? Each number after each number we have a space. So this part is done. But the part that's interesting is the before part. So as you can see here, one has some spaces before it, up to here. Similarly, two has some spaces before it. So these spaces are giving it the shape of a pyramid. Now we will determine how we are calculating these spaces. So if you focus here, you can see, let's check the number of spaces. So it has one, two, three, four spaces. So next time we have one, two, and three spaces. Next we have only two spaces. And in the last case, second last case, we have one space. And in the last case, we have no spaces. So now, as you can see, the spaces start and they are decremented by 1. So we have two options here. We can either start from the value of I and go up to total minus 1. So let's see. So initially value of I will be 1. We can start from I, then we will print a space, then we will print another space, then another space, then another space, and then our loop will break, since our k variable will get 5, and 5 is not less than 5, it is equal to 5. Therefore we will print 4 spaces. In the next iteration we will go from I to total. So now I is total, I is 2. So we will go from I to total minus 1. So we will go from I to total minus 1, that is 2 to 4. So for the second iteration, this space will get printed. For k is equal to 3, this will get printed. And for k is equal to 4, this space will get printed. And we will have our uh, desired space. Similarly, in this case, we will go from 3 to 4. So here we will print only two spaces, and then we will go from 4 to 4, which will cause us to print one space only. And in the last case, we will go from 5 to 4, which is not true. Therefore, this loop will never be executed, and hence there will be no spaces. So this loop is used to print spaces. Also, you can see another pattern. So what we can do, we can start from k is equal to 1, and we will go up to total minus I, right? Let me show you what I'm talking about. So in the first element, let's suppose k is 1, now k is 2, k is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So k is going up to 4. So we can either start k from I and go up to total minus 1, or we can start from 1 and go up to total minus I. That will also work. Since there are since our value spaces are total minus I for each iteration. So for first iteration, as you can see, our total variable is 5, but we have to print 4 spaces. So as you can see, I got subtracted from the total variable. In the next iteration, we need to print 3 spaces. So as you can see, 5 minus 2 equals 3. So it has subtracted these spaces. So in the end, in the next iteration, we are seeing that the value of I is 3 and we need 2 spaces. So we will simply minus uh, 5 minus 3, which returns us 2, and we need only 2 spaces. So these are two ways to build this logic. I built this one, but I'm gonna use another one since that seems more easy. Total minus I. So now for each iteration, we are going from k up to total minus I. Total is fixed and I is changing with each iteration. So let's run it. As you can see, we are getting our pattern. But there is one more thing. As you can see, this loop which is our third loop, will only execute for j is equal to 1. So it will only execute when the value of j is equal to 1. So let's dry run it. So first, let's check the second case. So first it will print three spaces. So first it will come here. It will see that for the second iteration, the value of I is obviously 2. It will come here. It will see that j is 1 and j1 is less than equal to 2. That's true. It will come into this block here. It will check whether j is equal to 1. Yes, that's true. J is equal to 1. Then it will enter this if block and then it will execute this loop. This loop goes from k is equal to total minus I, that is 1, from 1 to 5 minus 2, that is 3. So it will print three spaces. As you can see, it is printing three spaces. This line is printing three spaces repeatedly. Uh, then after exiting this if statement, it will print the value of I, that is 2. So we are here right now. We are printed this 2. Then then after printing, as you can see, after printing I am inserting a space. So after 2, a space is also printed. It will then come here. It will increment the value of j by 2. Now j is 2 and I is also 2, which was already 2. So now we are checking that 2 is equal to 2. Yes, that's true. It will enter the loop body. Now it will check that j is equal to 1. No, that's false. 2 isn't equal to 1. Therefore, it will skip this. It will not print spaces. It will come here. It will print the number, which is 2 here. And it will also add another space at the end of it. And then it will exit this loop. Since now j is 3 and 3 is not less than equal to 2, that's false, then this loop will break. It will come here and print this new line. It will print a new line for our next row, and then it will go to the top, and now it will run for I is equal to 3, and the same procedure will go on. So that's how you print patterns. um, you can make any value of total, like suppose you make total 20, it will still print a pattern. As you can see, it is still printed our exact pattern what we needed. Um you need to use the printf function to properly adjust these spaces. The actual logic of print is perfect. uh, Also, I want to show you one more thing. You can modify this program. Let's suppose I wanted to use print j instead. I wanted to a different pattern. Let's see this pattern. What if we print j? Now as you can see, we are getting different pattern. It works the exact same way, but our values are different. We are printing the value of j. So now we know how the J loop works. So you can use this input to understand more about this program. Now we are printing the value of j, not I. So for each iteration of I, the j is getting printed. Or we can make something similar to Flight's triangle, but it won't be a triangle. So we have to use additional variable called count. We will print the count variable, and then we will increment count after each printing. So now, as you can see, we got a different pattern. We can increase the value of count total by 10. So as you can see, we got a different pattern now. So if you want to adjust these spaces properly, if you want this properly spaced, what you have to do is you have to use printf function instead of this. Uh, so printf is also a function which we didn't talk about, but for now I can make it work. So I'm gonna use percentage 2d. It means that my every integer will be printed in two spaces, and then I have to use my variable, that is count. So this basically means that my count variable will be printed, each number will be printed with two spaces. So now as you can see, we got our pattern, but we forgot to add a new line. So sorry, extra space I mean. Now, as you can see, we got a pretty good pattern, but it needs more work to properly work. We can add if count less than 10. So as you can see, I'm modifying our program. This is not compulsory. I'm just modifying it. So now we got a pattern, but now I think this is pretty much it. So now our pattern is fine. It looks good enough. But that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching.